Hello, my lovely friends, this is Dina and welcome to a new video. I know I've been doing these videos quite a lot recently where I start a new sketchbook, so I hope that you're not bored of them, but this time we are starting yet another sketchbook. I bought this a little while ago after realizing that Moleskine actually makes these pocket-sized art collection sketchbooks, so it's basically the same exact sketchbook that I normally use now, but in just a smaller version, and I really enjoyed that idea, so I decided to get it for myself. And I was struggling for a little bit thinking how I would, start the sketchbook and what it would be for, but I decided to start it with a picture that I took on our trip last year to the Italian Dolomites. But before we get into talking about the actual painting, I want to talk about a few things before that. So basically, like I said, this is the exact sketchbook that I use normally, which is the Moleskine Art Collection sketchbook in size A5, except this is the pocket size, which I think is pretty much that but in half. So when you open this full spread, it opens to an A5 size, so it's pretty much half of that sketchbook that I normally use. I'm not going to go too much in detail into the specs of this sketchbook because I talked about that in my previous starting a new sketchbook video, but this has 160 GSM paper and I believe it has something like 80 pages or something. I'm not completely sure, but I think it at least has less than the bigger sketchbook. So like in the bigger sketchbook, this one also has that very smooth, non-textured paper that is a little bit yellowish, and this is definitely not the perfect sketchbook for watery mediums and paints, but I personally really enjoy using it, and I also used a lot of water with this painting and nothing bled through. It really worked well, so I think that is pretty safe to use with gouache. But if you're looking for that perfect sketchbook, this is probably not it for paints. I just love the vibe of this sketchbook and it just feels really low-key and fun, which I personally am all for. I especially love the fact that now I can paint these full spread paintings without having to make it as big as in my other sketchbook, because I often kind of gravitate towards the smaller one-page paintings in my normal A5 sketchbook because they are obviously a little bit smaller. You don't have to paint as big of a picture and it doesn't take you that long, so I often go for a little bit smaller ones. I do like to paint full spread paintings in my A5 sketchbook too, but I always just go for those like more vertical paintings instead of going for that full horizontal painting. So I quite like the fact that now I can create those full spread paintings without having to spend as much time on them as in my other sketchbook. The full spread, again, like I said, is pretty much an A5 size, so it really works for a little bit less intimidating and time-consuming painting processes, and I'm really looking forward to that with this one. But before I talk about the painting itself, I do want to say that this whole painting process from start to finish with sketching, reference photos, and all colors listed on the screen is available as a real-time video on my Patreon page on the Painting Club and Postcard Club tier. So if you want to see this whole painting process a little bit more in depth and you want to see all the parts included, definitely go check out my Patreon from the link below. There's also a lot of tutorials and extra real-time painting videos, so if you're looking into seeing a little bit more painting content from me, definitely go there. That is the best place for that. But anyway, as you could see, I started this whole painting process with a sketch, and you might have seen in the beginning where I had this other sketchbook that already had the sketch. I like to do this sometimes, especially when I'm working on pieces that I'm making for a video or just bigger pieces in general. I like to make a separate sketch on another sketchbook and then just kind of use that as my inspiration for the actual painting I'm going to do afterwards. So I basically just transferred that sketch into this one, obviously drawing it from scratch, but it gave me a lot of good insight on how I would like the layout to be, especially because the reference photo I used for this was actually a vertical photo instead of a horizontal one. So it just gave me a little bit more ideas on how to just kind of put everything to the paper. And then I started adding some colors on to the page. So if you're wondering what I'm painting here, this is actually my own reference photo that I took last year on a trip to the Italian Dolomites. We were on this trip and we went to Switzerland and Italy, and I actually have a video of that, like a little travel vlog where I also paint another scenery that has the Swiss Alps in it. But I thought that this was a beautiful photo, and overall I had so many good photos saved from that trip and I had not painted painted any of them. So I thought that now would be a great time to actually do that and just paint one of them into my new sketchbook. I especially loved this photo in particular because it had so many beautiful elements in it. It had this really bright blue sky and some clouds, and then some rocky hills and mountains, and this little valley or meadow underneath the mountains with some flowers, and then this fence and pathway and some houses. It really just kind of had everything, and I really just enjoy paintings that have a lot of different elements instead of a lot of repeating ones. Obviously, sometimes when I'm a little bit bored and lazy with my painting process, I do like a little bit more of a repeating pattern because it's a little bit easier. But this day I was definitely feeling like kind of focusing on different areas and different kinds of elements in a painting. So this was a lot of fun just painting this full Italian landscape in my sketchbook with all of these little details in it. Overall, I think that this whole painting is very different from my usual paintings. I think that I've noticed that I definitely go for these kind of trendy, kind of cottagecore inspired and countryside inspired paintings, and many of them are a little bit moody. They're not necessarily like super bright and colorful. I've noticed that many of my paintings recently have had this very dark and kind of colder toned sky in them, and even though it's fun and I quite like to do that because it usually just kind of makes the whole painting a little bit more balanced and doesn't kind of direct your eye to the sky when it's just a little bit muted and kind of more neutral in tone. But I noticed that it kind of makes some of my paintings a little bit more dull and kind of toned down, which is obviously an okay thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But I definitely noticed myself craving for this kind of more vibrant, daytime, summer day inspired painting that just had all these fun colors in it and just gave this super summery feel. And I have to say that I think that the blue sky was so refreshing and fun to paint, and it really brought this whole painting just together so well, and it just kind of made it so much more cheery and fun. And I think that I might have to paint a little bit more blue skies in my paintings because they just overall make the tone of the painting a little bit more fun and interesting in my opinion, even though I think that I still oftentimes will go for those more moody and neutral grayish toned skies anyway. Overall, I think that is always fun when you get to paint from your own reference photo, especially if it's taken in a place where, it's a little bit more meaningful. And I quite enjoyed the fact that I got to relive this trip a little bit with this painting. So it was super fun to paint this. And overall, I've been so sad that I haven't been painting more of my own reference photos because I actually take photos a lot. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably know this because I post a lot in my stories. I love to photograph. I love to take pictures in beautiful places, and I am oftentimes surrounded by beautiful places, but I don't get to paint them that often. It's not like someone is forcing me to paint something else, but I think that especially when you see a view so many times in your life, you're kind of like more inclined to do something a little bit different. But I think that these pictures that I took on this trip that I'm painting here were just kind of, a little bit different from my taste. Like I said, they are very vibrant and cheery, and my style hasn't been exactly that lately, but also they just have had so many beautiful elements that I'm kind of almost scared to paint them because I don't think I can do them justice in a way. And even though I don't usually think that way, I usually think that my sketchbook process is very self-indulgent, but sometimes it just has to have that right mood for you to do that, especially, painting from your own reference photos that are very meaningful to you. But I'm really happy that I chose to do this. I was kind of painting this as a preparation for another trip that I'm actually currently on. I'm in an Airbnb in the Swiss Alps actually, so I'm doing a very similar vacation as I did last year, going to Switzerland and Italy. I was already kind of daydreaming about being in the Alps, so I wanted to kind of go into this kind of painting instead of going for something different for this first spread, and I actually quite liked it. Just being able to go through the pictures that I took and choosing a favorite one that I wanted to make, and it was a fun process and definitely got me a little bit more prepared for this journey for sure. But anyway, with this whole process, I tried to be a little bit more loose than I am normally with, you know, full spread paintings. I quite like to just look at the general shapes and colors in my reference photo, but then just kind of translating that into a painting without having to make it perfect. Because again, I said that, you know, sometimes it's a little bit intimidating turning actual meaningful photographs into paintings because, you know, then you feel like you're not doing justice to them. So I really just tried to kind of approach this whole process with, you know, just making a beautiful painting and just kind of adding these fun colors onto my page and kind of, yeah, living through that day once again without having to, you know, make everything perfect and exactly like in the reference photo. I was very loose with the fence and the pathway, for example, and the mountains in the back. I was really just adding in colors and usually using a lot of water. So I was making everything a little bit more unintentional, and I quite enjoyed that process because I think that with this process I was able to get some more fun into the practice of painting for me, because overall I think that I was able to add some more fun into my painting process with this like a little bit more loose style and not worrying about the details too much. There is this person that I follow on Instagram who makes amazing art. Her name is Aline M Art, maybe, I'm not completely sure how it's pronounced but her style is so beautiful. It's a little bit more loose while still being detailed, and it's very vibrant and cheery, and I really love that. I've sometimes kind of compared our pieces, or like not necessarily compared like next to each other, but I've noticed that we do details very differently, and I think that somehow she manages to have a lot more detail in her art without actually creating a lot of those sharp small details that I often do. So I tried to kind of have more of that mindset into this painting, that I don't have to worry about the tiniest details. I can kind of try to make the whole thing work without having to focus on the tiniest little dots and pieces of details in this piece, and I quite like that result. I definitely often have these artists that I kind of like envy their art style. I don't necessarily think that, oh my gosh, I wish I was as good as them, but it's just like I wish my art style was a little bit more like that, and I feel like all of us have probably those feelings about someone, but it's just like her art style is so good, and I think that with this painting I definitely was able to channel something like that. I wasn't obviously copying her or anything, but just like trying to forget about the tiniest details and focusing on the big picture instead. And I think that I actually got there, and I really love how this turned out. This is definitely one of my favorite paintings in a little bit, and I hope that I can kind of continue this flow into the other spreads in my sketchbook and even on some of my other paintings that I'm going to be doing on this trip that I'm currently on, because I am planning on painting some more Swiss and Italian landscapes in my sketchbooks as well. But even though I said that this was kind of like a more loose and messy process, this also still took me a little bit over 2 hours. So it's not like this was a super fast and easy thing to do. This was still a time-consuming painting, but considering how long some of my other full spread paintings in the past have taken me in my bigger sketchbook, that was definitely a win that it still took that short of a time. So I was really happy with that, and it also got me really excited to paint some more, because I'm sometimes, you know, very good at procrastinating, and especially if I know that a painting will probably take me somewhere like 6 or 8 hours, that's oftentimes just like such a big thing that I'm trying to procrastinate on. Like I sometimes really struggle starting a painting especially. So just knowing that this took me such a short amount of time and it still turned out so pretty, it really got me excited to work more in this sketchbook. And by the way, I would love to hear if you want to see more paintings inside of the sketchbook overall. I know that I've been mostly posting my like sketchbook videos on my Patreon, so if you want to see more sketchbook content and just like regular kind of more casual and chill sketchbook painting content here on YouTube, I would love to know that so I can, you know, publish more videos like this. If you are wondering what I will be using this sketchbook for, I have to say I have no idea yet. I think that often when I start a new sketchbook, I start it unknowing where it will take me, and then it will start to find its shape and its meaning after a little bit when I kind of get to know that particular sketchbook a little bit more. So I'm not sure if this will be a sketchbook that I go for often, or if it's kind of a backup sketchbook that I sometimes create these more loose landscapes in or what this will be exactly, but I'm excited to, find that out one day. Honestly, I think that it's hard for me to answer this question, especially because I'm not currently in the most inspired state. I often go through these waves of inspiration and painting motivation and creativity, and currently I'm on this like a little bit more mellow path, and I'm in some ways enjoying summer, doing something a little bit different. I think that my most inspired times throughout the whole year are spring and autumn, and summer and winter are always a little bit harder to go through, I think, because of the darkness and the light as well. And I think that during summers it's kind of always given that you do a lot and you're very active and you kind of focus more on like outdoorsy hobbies instead of these cozy indoor hobbies like painting or something. So I think that I've been gravitating towards other hobbies often, and especially during summers. So I am excited for autumn. I've been honestly waiting for it the whole time. I'm definitely getting to the part in my life where I actually admit that I'm not a summer person at all. I love autumn, and I think that it just makes me a little bit more calm and peaceful, and it just feels a little bit better creativity wise. So I'm really looking forward to that time, and I think that that will be the moment when I know what the sketchbook is exactly for. And I think that I will be definitely going for this if I want to create something a little bit quicker and just do a little one spread painting once in a while and just kind of see where it takes me. But I have to say, when I got to the cabins, I was a little bit confused about how I wanted to make them, because the other landscape had been so loose and a little bit more messy. I was kind of scared to make the cabins because I was scared that I was going to, make them look very different from the background. And I think that I actually did that with the first cabin. I was a little bit too detailed and went back into my normal ways of creating art. So I think that I just overall added a little bit too sharp details there. So I tried to tone it down by just like blending everything together a little bit and then working a little bit more loosely on my other cabin on the right side. And I actually think that that turned out really good. So I found my way after a little bit of a struggle with trying to find the way that I wanted to create it. That is definitely my own struggle most of the time, that I just spend too much time on details because it's something I'm so used to doing. But I'm really excited to just kind of, practice this kind of art style of not worrying about the tiny details as much, because then I think that that will also make just the process a little bit more enjoyable overall. So yeah, looking forward to getting better with that in the future. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this new sketchbook video. I have to say that I'm so excited about painting in this sketchbook, and overall I was really excited to edit this video and get it done for you, because it just really, like, this whole scenery just made me really happy, and I'm so excited to paint more sceneries like this and work more in the sketchbook overall, and just having some more variety in where I create my artwork. Instead of just working on one sketchbook, I can now work on multiple different sketchbooks, and that's kind of fun and refreshing for me after these years of mainly just creating art in one sketchbook. But I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video. Again, don't forget that I have the real-time version of this painting on my Patreon. So if you want to see that, head on to my Patreon, where you will find a lot of extra videos as well. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, like this video, and leave a mountain emoji down in the comments so I know you watched until the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye.